Yay! Thank you, Brian. Brian Fitzy, everyone, our amazing musician. Thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome and good morning to you all. This is our first trademark event of 2022, not our first event, of course. I'm Nicole Stevenson, the Executive Director of the Society of Professional Women program at the Mainline Chamber of Commerce. SPW would not be possible without the continued support of our members and most of all our sponsors. So please allow me to share my screen and thank all of the sponsors that continue to support our mission, which is to accelerate the advancement and expand the influence of women leaders of all professions and generations, strengthen our business community, and support the region's nonprofit organizations. So please allow me to share my screen now.
Hi, I'm Jen Ryan. So I am Jen from Jen and Bill in the Morning here on Philly's B101.1. And B101 is so happy to be a sponsor of the Society for Professional Women. And we want to welcome you to today's event, which could not happen without our sponsors. So I'd like to take a minute right now to thank them.
Champion sponsor, First Trust Bank. Women's Health sponsor, Mainline Health. Employee Benefits sponsor, My Benefit Advisor. Communication sponsor, Comcast Business. Diamond sponsors, B101.1. Women Helping Women sponsor, Fidelity Investments. And education sponsor, St. Joe's University. And now our platinum sponsors, Stradley, Ronan, Stevens & Young. Gold sponsors, 1847 Financial, Closets by Design, Curaleaf, Enterprise Holdings and Fleet Management, Mainline Today, Montgomery County Community College, MRS Audiovisual, PNC Bank, UGI AmeriGas, United Healthcare, Univest Corporation, Vertex, and Wells Fargo. Silver sponsors, Aqua, an essential utilities company, CSL Bearing, Ernst & Young, Macy's, Pico, Pictures by Todd Photography, Suburban Square, The Giant Company, Villanova College of Professional Studies, and WSFS Bank.
Yay, virtual applause. Thank you so much. These companies demonstrate a commitment to greater gender equity and diversity, so please support them whenever possible. The strength of SPW is deeply rooted in its ability to provide extensive knowledge and resources through its transformational programming, while at the same time bringing together people and companies that support a common mission and connecting them with one another to create outcomes with a lasting impact. Our next SPW event will be on Thursday, April 14th, with HGTV star and real estate broker Egypt Sherrod for Limitless Living, Tapping into Our Highest Potential. She is a nationally recognized celebrity and author, and we feel fortunate to have her traveling from Georgia for our first in-person event in 2022 at Drexelbrook Catering and Event Center. You can register and learn more about our health and safety guidelines and being in person with us again soon at spwmainline.com. You can also continue to help us serve you by communicating with our staff, taking our surveys after the events, and by interacting with us and others on social media using our hashtags, hashtag MLCC and hashtag SPWMainline. Thank you again for your support. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping. You may be very familiar with Zoom, but I'm just going to circle back real quick. So we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the program. There is a Q&A box and a chat box. Please be sure to use the Q&A box for your questions so they don't get lost in the chat. We encourage you to put your contact information in the chat right now so that you can get to know others on the call, and you can save that chat, which I recommend doing at the end of the program to collect as much of that data as possible by clicking those little three dots at the right-hand corner of your screen at the bottom. So save the chat. If not, don't worry. We're going to continue our networking efforts by connecting individuals in the networking portion of the program today through a meeting link, which you will receive in the chat now and also in the original email that you registered with so that you can meet people in that meeting room. We're also going to send an attendee list out today after the program and be willing to make introductions to individuals that perhaps you didn't get their information. And we're going to send a copy of our recording today as well as list it at spwmainline.com. I'd like to welcome back and thank award-winning NBC 10 anchor Tracy Davidson for being our interview host today. Tracy has has been an important supporter of SBW for a long time, and we have enjoyed her expertise when she can not only interview our featured guests, but Tracy herself has also provided keynote presentations for us. So thank you for your time, Tracy, today. And welcome and thank you to our highly respected featured guest, Dr. Marissa Porges, for your leadership in our region and preparation in bringing an engaging dialogue and an informative dialogue to our audience today. And I look forward to both of your conversations. So let's get started. As you all know, giving back to the nonprofit community is a big part of the SBW mission. In just over a decade, SBW has awarded over $80,000 to local nonprofits. We are thrilled that our communications sponsor, Comcast Business, will be donating a $1,000 check to our featured nonprofit today. It's my pleasure to introduce Regional Advanced Sales Manager Lisa Harmon McAllis to today's program to share more about Comcast Business and also introduce the YMCA of Greater Brandywine. Thank you, Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. And as always, again, my name, Lisa Harmon McAllis. I am an advanced sales manager for Comcast Business, primarily focused on Montgomery County, but I'm always excited and happy and honored to work with SBW. So today, our featured nonprofit organization is the YMCA of Greater Brandywine. The YMCA of Greater Brandywine is committed to nurturing the potential, and I'm so sorry about that, of every child and teen with a robust catalog of offerings, including early learning programs, summer camps, swimming lessons, youth sports, arts, and humanity programs, and careers. They positively impact thousands of young people in and around the Chester County community each year. They believe that all children deserve access to programming and to spaces where they can learn, grow, and more importantly, thrive. We at Comcast Business are proud to support their efforts and today present them with a check of $1,000. Please welcome Senior Director of Youth Programs, Janelle Brandberg from the Upper Main Line YMCA.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Lisa, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm honored to be sharing the screen with so many wonderful women. At the Y, we create opportunities for children and teens of all ages to improve their lives and their communities. The YMCA of Greater Brandywine welcomes all, and this is why our programs, services, and initiatives are so wide-ranging. Just to start, the Y's Early Learning Center and childcare are staffed with people who understand the cognitive, physical, and social development of kids, the support that parents and families need, and the importance of maintaining a safe, clean environment for children to learn and thrive. At the YMCA, infants develop trust and security. Our preschoolers experience early literacy and learn about the world around them. Another program that I'm very proud to touch upon is the YMCA Earth Service Corps. It's an innovative, youth-led environmental program for children in grades 6 through 12. We empower the students to take a hands-on role in creating a healthier environment in their school, communities, and the region, while nurturing the respect for diversity within the natural world. Another great program is called Stride for All. This 10-week-long inclusive program offers children in grades 3 through 5 an opportunity to build teamwork and communication skills through fun team challenges, all while covering topics that kids face today. Through interactive games and activities, children explore and discuss important life topics, while fitness activities such as running and basic movement help build stamina and their confidence. And finally, a program very near and dear to my heart, the performing arts programming here at the Upper Main Line YMCA sparks creativity in all of our youth. Children and teens learn to express themselves in ways that they never knew possible. We offer programs to build future artists, actors, dancers, playwrights, musicians, and technical theater directors. Through participation in drama, music, and dance, our youth are using art to learn valuable life skills. The performing arts allow for the development and flourishment of self-expression for students to help them establish their identity. These are just a few of the many programs that the YMCA of Greater Brandywine offers our youth. I am honored to be involved in each and every one of these programs and to have the opportunity to see the YMCA's mission alive each and every day. Thank you so much for including me today.
Thank you so much, Janelle, and thank you to Lisa at Comcast Business. It's now my pleasure to introduce Michelle Burkholder of 1847 Financial. Michelle has had the opportunity to participate in our SPW Women Helping Women Peer Mentoring Circle, as well as being a featured presenter herself for various SPW programs with her longstanding support over the years. So please welcome Michelle to the program today.
Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. We have at 1847 have been a very loyal supporter of SPW, and they've also supported us quite a bit too. Between Nicole, Bernie, and the staff at Mainline Chamber, they help us maximize our sponsorship and give us opportunities to meet some amazing speakers. You know, I'm really excited about the speakers today, not only as a mother of 2 daughters, but I also lead a team of financial advisors, and we're all women on my team. So I'm really interested in hearing what everyone has to say and ways to improve the way I mentor the women that I work with, and also the girls that the young adults that I'm helping to raise. So today it's my honor to introduce, first of all, Tracy Davidson. Most of you know her as the anchor for NBC 10 News. You can see her live on weekdays at either 4 and 5 p.m. And over the last 20 years, she has served as both an anchor and a consumer reporter and has represented the stations at hundreds of community and charity events throughout the greater Philadelphia area. She's received 11 Emmy Awards, including the Best Anchor Emmy for the Mid-Atlantic region in 2008 and 2013. She was recognized with Pennsylvania's Most Powerful and Influential Women Award by the National and Pennsylvania Diversity Council. In 2014, she was inducted into Philadelphia's Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame. Passionate about many causes, Tracy devotes much of her personal time to community service. She enjoys motivational speaking and presents on a variety of topics, and she freely shares her breast cancer survival story with her message, "Don't wait." Our esteemed guest today that she's going to be interviewing is Dr. Marissa Porges. Dr. Porges is the author of What Girls Need: How to Raise Bold, Courageous, and Resilient Women. She's known for her work in leadership, education, and national security. She's currently the 8th head of the Baldwin School. That is an 134-year-old all-girls school outside the Philadelphia and it's renowned for its academic excellence and for preparing girls to be leaders and change makers. Prior to joining Baldwin, Marissa served as a leading national security expert in government and academia. Most recently, she worked in the Obama White House as a senior policy advisor at the National Economic Council, handling cybersecurity and technology policy. She also served as the counterterrorism policy advisor in both the Obama and the Bush administrations at the Department of Defense and Treasury. Marissa began her career on active duty in the U.S. Navy as a naval flight officer. She earned her bachelor's degree in geophysics from Harvard, her master's from London at the School of Economics, and her doctorate from King's College in London. She has served as a commentator for CNN, C-SPAN, and other major news outlets, and she has been published extensively by the New York Times, New Yorker, Foreign Affairs, Philadelphia Inquirer, and more. I am both proud and humbled to welcome Tracy and Dr. Porges.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you. And thanks to Dr. Porges for doing this. Thanks to SPW for hosting this. Dr. Porges, for people who don't know, can you just give us a short synopsis of your resume? Because your journey is quite different from most of ours, and it took some significant turns along the way. Your chapters are quite different. Can you walk us through a little bit of your history?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So my thanks to SPW, to our sponsors, Tracy for joining us today, and looking at everyone who's been logging into the chat to sharing where you're from and what brings you here. It is fantastic to see such a diversity of folks who are coming to the table today to talk about agility, adaptability, but also sort of just the daily things that we as professional women may be facing. So open to all questions and look forward to that portion of our conversation. Yeah, I mean, you know, I am so grateful for the generous bio reading that we just had. But to give a little color to the stories, you know, I've had the good fortune of, I say, choosing my own adventure along the way, following different dreams that came up from my childhood dream of flying jets off carriers for the US Navy. That was what the naval flight officer does, the first job you heard described. I flew jets off of the USS Lincoln, was deployed in the Pacific, was able to serve my country and learn my first lessons of leadership as a naval officer on active duty. I then transitioned and spent some time in the US government at the senior levels of the Pentagon and the Treasury Department, handling counterterrorism strategy and policy. And again, learning some of the critical lessons of both leadership, but also the things that I think we'll talk about today about the perspective and different ways of leading that many women bring to the table, and how that is so impactful and so powerful, and we really need to own that. And then, you know, I had the good fortune of being at the White House in my last job in government, handling cybersecurity issues under the Obama administration, when I got a crazy call from Baldwin, my alma mater, to say, hey, would you be interested? They're looking for the next head of the organization, leader of the school. And, you know, these are the moments that I think we as women have to really encourage ourselves and each other to think outside the box, grab golden rings, like go after things that may seem different on the face of it, but when you distill it down, it still serves, you know, there's a purpose and a mission you believe in. There's a community that you'll enjoy being part of and, you know, be rewarded for both giving and giving back. And it continues to build, you know, our professions and our careers in interesting ways. And so that is where the interesting, odd, you know, how it pivoted along the way came about. But at the end of the day, I had the good fortune of having opportunities to be in communities that are mission focused, about giving back to others, and, you know, are fun and challenging. And I think, you know, I'm sure you could say the same thing for your own work, Tracy.
Yes, but my adventures are not quite like yours. Yours are pretty fantastic. So I know that a lot of people change careers today. It's pretty typical. And you talk about choosing your adventures. When did you know it was time to choose your next adventure? And sometimes we look forward and we say, okay, now I want to do this. So you say you've been blessed with being able to choose your next adventure. And sometimes I think we're in a place that maybe was right for us at one point, but then you realize that you might be not aligned anymore with whatever that original mission was. Can you talk about how you decided this is my next adventure?
Yeah. It's such an important conversation, and I'll say for two reasons. One, because the next generation coming up behind us that we want to be mentoring and guiding, the next generation of girls and boys will change jobs in their lifetime vastly more than anyone on the call today. A young person now who's leaving high school will change jobs by age 40 approximately 9 times. Like that's what research shows. You know, most people who've been out in the career world, that isn't something you would expect to do in your entire lifetime, much less by age 40. And so this is something the next generation really is thinking about differently than I think many of us. I also have to say that the pandemic, the past 2 years, have also forced many professionals to think differently about what we're looking for, how we want to manage our lives, how we want to manage our careers. And so it's a very timely question to be asking. I think what occurs to me is, you know, I'll talk about my first major shift when I left the US Navy, when I left active duty and joined the Pentagon, but as a civilian, sort of took off my boots and my flight suit and sort of went to work in real clothes for the first time. Like my first suit was a little later in life than many people because I had been wearing a flight suit for so long. And, you know, this is the reality of sometimes the decisions they appear in weird ways. and they're not planned. And you have to see it and think, okay, I'm going to take a risk here. What does that risk look like? And here's the story. So when I was flying for the Navy, it'd been my childhood dream for many years. I was like, if you looked at my childhood yearbook, most likely to amongst the list was like, fly jets. Okay. That's, your 10-year-old self sort of projecting out for many years. And when it came to it, when I was in flight school and then in flight school and left and joined a squadron when I was deployed, turns out that physiologically speaking, I did not adapt very well to combat missions, to flying combat jets. Which is to say, when we banked and turned and dipped and weave and had violent maneuvers, I got violently sick, right? A little bit of an overshare, but I'm used to doing it now that I've had to share this story more often than not because of the book. And it wasn't fun for anyone, but I managed through it. I mean, I'd committed to serving. I was serving the nation. This is what I had been planning to do for so long. And it was that plan. I think so many of us think we have a plan and we need to stick with it. And it wasn't until a few years in to, sort of the deployed aviator's lifestyle where I was flying with my skipper, the senior most officer in my squadron, who was also my mentor. And it was the first time we flew together, and we went out for a long mission, late night, what they call double cycle out. You refuel, you do things again. You're landing in every aviator's both dream and nightmare, dark of night, pitching air deck, stormy seas. And it was a difficult mission. And I started getting violently sick, but was containing it. But he could tell something was wrong. The tone of my voice changed. My ability to handle things I was managing, but it was different. We landed safely and it was late at night, and he pulled me aside and said, as we were walking back from the flight deck, and he said, "What happened up there?" Chopper, my call sign, different story for another time. He said, "What happened up there? If we're going to be in combat together, I need to know from here, like something, was different." And I finally admitted to the first time to someone who was more senior than I, what really happened in the plane and how much I struggled, but was going to do my damnedest to do it well. And his response was really striking. And he basically said, there's other ways to serve besides flying. And it was the first time someone pointed out that there are other options out there that serve your plan, that can propel you forward and serve your inner needs, but may require risky pivots. And we were in the Pacific Ocean, and I actually called my father from a satellite phone that he gave me and said, "Dad, what if I don't fly anymore?" And, a good father just supports your child through everything. We got your back, whatever you want. But what happened over the next 6 months was this decision, Tracy, where a little bit had been put, not want to say forced upon me, but sort of had been put forward to me as maybe there's something else. And then I leaned into it and I said, okay, right, what else is there? And I developed a way to be, and this is where I first developed the sort of skills of agility that we can talk to later, of really figuring out, what does it mean to pivot intellectually, emotionally, logistically, operationally, change your whole life up to do something new. And so I think the two answers are, one, sometimes these decisions, we don't see them being made for us, but they come and the signals happen in little ways, and we need to recognize those moments. And then the second part is to take the risk of exploring, building your team so you have people behind you to explore the options and say, all right, it'll be risky, but I've built a new plan and I'm going to go after it. So hopefully that sort of gives folks a sense of why and how the pivots over time.
Yeah, I very much hear the idea of being aware, being able to notice, right? You mentioned the pandemic, and I think we all had to make significant pivots, sort of everybody forced into a remote reality with one another. And I continually say that we can't throw out everything of the last 2 years, because one thing that we can take with us is the knowledge that we adapted, right? We learned things, we taught ourselves things, we were problem solvers. What were the, right? What were the challenges that you faced at the Baldwin School, and what were the solutions?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, this is a whole own webinar that would last well more than an hour, because, we are a school for girls aged 4 to 18 years old, pre-kindergarten through grade 12. We are an in-person institution. We have recognized, especially over the past few years, the power and impact and importance of being in person, particularly for girls and young women who want and need that connection with each other, with their teachers, with their advisors, their coaches. Like, the community aspect of what we do is critical. And, you know, because of what I'll talk about next, of how we adapted, we've been in person throughout the pandemic, except for the few weeks when the governor had shut us down. We have run an in-person program for all ages, you know, from all last year, all this year, and done it safely, right, amidst the pandemic. And the keys here, I'll sort of speak to three. One is a real focus on our people, right? And this is actually where I think female leaders do it often more naturally and better than men. Research does show, and I can even point to data that says, you know, we empathize differently. We are socialized to think differently about the other, to mediate, find middle ground, all these things. And it meant that from an early moment, we as a team at the school put our people, our teachers, our faculty, our students front and center and said, we know what they need, but we need to figure out different ways to deliver it, different ways to make sure our teachers felt supported, that they had flexibility, that we, you know, offer different childcare options because pandemic needs change, eat meal options, you know, how do we meet the girls where they are for those who have health concerns, things like that. The other element of it was a real team approach. I'm so proud of the Baldwin community because it really took a team effort from day one or pre-day one. I mean, this was the military in me. We had a you know, ad hoc task force set up 3 weeks prior to, you know, everything being shut down because we started to see the news happening in other places. But this is where everyone around the table had a perspective that was valued. Again, something female leaders really do well is making room for diverse opinions at the table. It's why more companies should have more females at senior leadership, but also where, when they're there, finding ways to help them feel heard, bring systems in place such that people have chances to weigh in and provide ideas, whether it's surveys or moments of open meetings over Zoom or moments around task force groups where, you know, faculty are there, parents are there, other people are there to say, hey, an idea, why don't we think differently about, insert here, how we do something during a pandemic because it's a crisis no one had faced. And then the last thing I'll talk about briefly is communication. I think crises are moments when over communication is key. Transparency to the greatest you can is critical, and really leaning into that at multiple levels to say we're sharing as much as we can, as often as we can. This is what we know. This is what we're doing. Helps bring your people along. So that's why I'm, again, so proud of what Baldwin has been able to do over the past 2 years to sustain and grow our program and our school, like in the midst of a pandemic, still introducing new programs and new classes and new opportunities for the girls. And it's also what you've seen, I'm sure, Tracy, and lots of other institutions you've looked at. And I think it speaks to particularly what female professionals can bring to a lot of organizations and teams in very unique moments.
And during the pandemic, there was and there continues to be so much focus on agility, adaptability, you know, just the ability to roll with things. But I think that is an ability that will always serve us well because change is the only constant. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's amazing to see that we've almost now are just realizing how important this is. And it's interesting. They've actually, I mean, I'm sure everyone knows what, you know, they've heard the term IQ, intellectual quotient. You may have recently over the past 10, 20 years heard the term EQ, emotional quotient, the ability one has to own and use your emotions in a professional and powerful way. In the past decade, there's actually been social science research looking into what they call the adaptability quotient, a new concept that says, yes, change is the only constant. The world is changing at a faster pace than ever before. Whether you look at technology and, you know, even getting on the Zoom today or the new iPhone I just transitioned to that I can't figure out how to silence and get my text messages off of, whether it's that or simply what work looks like, in-person versus remote versus hybrid, or how we work, who we work with globally, nationally, right? All sorts of different people. Change is something that we as adults and definitely our kids need to be able to handle and maneuver well. I do think that the pandemic not only shone a light on that, but also shone a light on how naturally adept a lot of women are to that challenge. And I'll speak to this through the personal lens. I think, there is something to be said for the fact that women as mothers, a unique role as professional mothers, we have to adapt on a personal and professional level in a vastly different way than our male colleagues. It's just the truth. Now, not to say everyone, this is only about being a mother or having a child, but for those who have gone through that, I'm sure you may recall those early days when you were trying to figure out how it works, what happens, what it looks like, whether you're taking a short maternity leave or a long maternity leave, a break, or returning to work. That is fundamentally something that women have to learn on the go and figure out how to do it. And for me, I actually was a new mom 3 years ago, and the pandemic hit when the baby was 6 months old. And I was in the role full time throughout, here leading. And I remember now reflecting, and if we were doing PowerPoint, I would show you the pictures from those early days, right? Where I was falling asleep doing work with the baby on my lap and the dog on the floor and the iPhone in my hand. But upon reflection, the lessons that I learned when I was reshaping and recrafting my own identity and professional self in that moment, and then a couple months later, having to do it when forced with external changes, so helpful. And so I want everyone in the audience who has had the joy and pleasure and, craziness of, making that transition to think about how powerful that is and how much that is a part of our agility toolbox, right? Because the things with agility, it's about learning to think different operationally and logistically. You plan your day differently. You think about priorities differently. You sort of manage your schedule, manage your timelines differently because of pandemic, because of Zoom, because of in-person, because of a baby. When you're agile, you emotionally do things differently. You manage your emotions differently because change is hard. You have to manage the people around you and your team. Again, something when you become a new mom, or that is part of the job description. And then lastly, you think differently when you're agile. You think about risk, you take risks, you analyze options slightly differently. Something I think that, again, not to say it's only about being a mother, but it is an interesting moment to say, hey, that has prepared us, and those are tools in our quiver that we should be using across the board. So Tracy, I can speak to the other research about other ways it works too, but I think those are some important things I hope we all keep in mind as professional women, particularly.
Yeah, and I hope that we all are able to recognize how we have grown. I call it resilience, the resilience quotient too, how we've grown our skills under all of those umbrellas to recognize that as we move forward to whatever the next change is that comes our way. Now, let me do a little commercial about your book, which I have read. And I love it. And I just want to say to anyone who loves young women, I have 2 teenage nieces. Anyone who leads young women from teenagers to 20s to 30s to 40s, we all need mentors and mentees. This is great because it talks about your journey, and I always choose my words and instead of but, and it really talks about how we cannot, we always use the words encourage and empower. That's great. I don't know what that means. Specifically, tell me how to help my young nieces. And that's what your book does, which is just so helpful to anyone. It's a great read. So I see it on the shelf behind you. So I really, really encourage anyone to go get the book. It's on Amazon. It'll be at your doorstep in 2 days. It's so good. So one of the things that you talk about in here is celebrating our traits, and you just mentioned one of them that we already have, right? We already have these superpowers. They can be developed, but that's the gift from God. We've been given this gift of empathy and collaboration and adaptability. Tell me, talk more about why they are so critical and why we can see them as, I think the term you used in here was feminine advantage. Mm-hmm. That we go into rooms often thinking that we're at the disadvantage because we're the only ones at the table, or we don't have I'm a man and I'm in control. But what we do have is this superpower, these feminine advantages that can really help us to lead our teams in better ways.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm so glad you use the term superpower, because I do think there are some things that come naturally, are socialized, and how women girls are raised. But that when we think about it and nurture it, becomes not just a strength, but a competitive advantage in any environment and a superpower overall. We just spoke to one that's about adaptability and agility, and we can go back to that because I do think that is something that does come more naturally to girls and women, including how we're taught to multitask and how we're sort of pushed in different ways, and that is helpful. But I want to key on something that you just said about empathy. Because I think we often think of empathy or have thought about empathy as a quote unquote soft skill, something that's valuable, but is it as valuable as insert here something else? And the reality is it is more valuable than some of the other skills that we have long sort of said need to be at the table at this, if you're going to be a leader or a successful professional. Empathy has been shown to drive profit margins. Empathy has been shown to make you a better negotiator. Empathy has been shown to make you better leader. It improves retention amongst your people, whether, your teachers or your employees or whomever. Empathy is something that, again, it's become such a powerful tool in every industry that even the US Army introduced it to its field manual for officers a few years ago, where they now teach empathy to young officers and say it is something you are going to be measured on, because we know empathy is important on the battlefield. One of the folks I interviewed for the book is a senior US general who had a mentor of mine who was in Iraq for the Iraq War. And he says empathy is how he understood both the enemy and the people he was trying to protect, and was able to make decisions for his people on the battlefield. And empathy, research shows, is something that comes more naturally and is socialized amongst young girls. One interesting study showed that when you show 5- and 6-year-old boys and girls, like a movie, it's actually a movie called Rodney, for those who remember the Disney movie from a few years ago. The story is not important, but all to say there's a central character who has to go through some stuff. And every kid in this era, when they did the research, had seen the movie. And then they watched it again and asked questions. What is Rodney the robot thinking? How is he feeling? What do you think he is worried about? And statistically speaking, far and away, the little young girls versus the little boys understood and empathized with Rodney, could make decisions with Rodney in mind. I think Rodney is thinking this, Rodney is worried about that, and this is what Rodney may, need next. You play that out over the years, and there's been longitudinal studies and research, but also personal experience here at Baldwin that would say our girls, our women think differently about relating to the other person. And this, Tracy, is such a powerful skill to have around any table at any level. And it is, I would say, one of our female superpowers. So recognizing empathy as a skill that is powerful, recognizing it as something that is socialized, nurtured, just societally, socially speaking, in Western culture, in young women more than boys. And then saying, okay, well, what do we do about it next? How do we make this the skill that when you walk into a room and you're selling yourself for your next employer, you say, yeah, I'm going to be better at negotiating, leading a team, improving retention, and improving profit because I am good at empathizing. So that is sort of the research. I have to say, I first realized this when I was doing research myself in the Middle East. And at the time I was researching counterterrorism and terrorist organizations, and I was actually sitting and doing interviews with former members of Al-Qaeda. And my ability to empathize with somebody who previously, as a young Jewish American woman, had wanted to kill me, my ability to connect with them and understand and have a conversation that moved forward was so critical to me to being able to do my job effectively. And that's sort of when it all came together for me, and as part of the stories in the book, to say empathy is key. We need to help girls lean into it, and it's something that should be our superpower moving forward.
And just to add to that, my co-host Jen Kronberger, who we do events for women, and that is almost her entire job right now. Is she goes into companies, and she is hired specifically to go in and teach people how to grow their empathy skills. So it's recognized, everybody wants it, and we already have the seeds to develop. Talk about healthy competition for girls and women. The chapter in here is cultivate her competitive spirit. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, this unfortunately is something that isn't a natural superpower to many women because as a society, we tend from a young age to discourage a competitive nature amongst girls, which is to say, for many folks, if a girl wants to opt out of a sport, we say, sure, don't worry about it. But if a boy wants to opt out, we say, hey, do you want a different sport? Let's try again. Maybe it's maybe it's baseball, not soccer. I've actually had conversations with parents where that was, that was what they were saying. Oh, she doesn't really want to play anymore. So I'm going to say, fine, don't worry about it. But my son, we need to find a sport for him. And not that competition is all about sports, but it's the first place young girls hear a different message than a lot of our boys. The truth of the matter is competition, healthy competition, right? The willingness to, be judged against your peers and in sort of an open setting, the willingness to win or lose graciously, the willingness to take risk and be resilient. Those are skills that matter throughout life. It's about going for your first job. It's about, vying for that apartment that everyone's going after. It's about running for PTA president, right? All those moments require you to put yourself forward, be judged against others, be okay no matter the outcome, right? That's what being a healthy competitor is. It's not the maladaptive version where you win at all costs and sort of are, nasty about it and can't take a loss, right? The reality is from a young age, girls oftentimes hear messages that send signals to say, being too competitive is not nice. Being too competitive means you're being bad with your friends or sort of diminishing them. That is not what we need them to think. Any mom out there knows you want your daughter to be, any dad too. You need your daughter to walk into that room and say, hey, I can do that and I want it too. And so there's things that we can do from an early age. It's again, that sports idea of how to make sure sports are a very easy, accessible way for kids to get used to being out there and competing. It's also about other moments. It's that poetry contest you just heard the local library announce. It's the running for the head of the newspaper or the head of the student council in middle school, which is when many girls start opting out because of peer pressure and social norms, start opting out of these moments. And indeed, one young girl I interviewed for the book described that exact thing happening in a spelling bee. She was on stage for the spelling bee, had made it to the finals, knew the answer, and then at the last minute flubbed it on purpose. She actually recalls that she knows exactly what the question was because the answer was something that her dad always made them go to historical landmarks and read the signs, and it was something she knew of because that last summer they'd had to read the sign that had that in it, right? But when she got to the stage, she saw her friends up there, and she's like, "Oh, I don't want them to think I'm being mean. I don't care." And so she opted out. She said, I don't know the answer. She made up a wrong answer. I forget which. That is not what we want our 10 and 12-year-old girls to think is okay, because when they're 18, 19, 24, 25, the default is to not opt into a political election, to not go for that job that there's going to be other people that is going to be sort of a tough job to go for, to not sort of put their name forward to run an organization in their community. And so again, I do think that unlike the superpower talk, this is something where there's still a gap. And research shows that the gap lasts from early childhood all the way through adulthood. And I think talking about it, recognizing it, and just finding little ways to do things differently with girls in mind is really helpful.
Let's talk about the gap of being sort of underrepresented across all senior levels in politics, in the boardroom. And how important gender diversity is, and how can we empower our young people, our coworkers, our future leaders of all identities to sort of step up and be part of that workplace?
Yeah, statistics show that still to this day, approximately 5% of CEOs of major companies are women. 25% of elected officials are women, even though America is 51% women for statistically speaking. Like all these places, no matter where you look, there's just the reality of women being underrepresented still. So what do we do about it? I think we have conversations like this. And I think we're honest with I think there's two things. We're honest about the realities that still in 2022, there are barriers to entry for women. There are moments that play out differently for women around any conference table in any industry. It's the fact that women are still in this era, statistically speaking, interrupted by men more often than a man at the table. Even at the Supreme Court, you look at the research in the Supreme Court and they say, and this was done under the prior, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So take that into account. You know, it is a couple of years old, but we're talking 5 years old, not more. And the female Supreme Court justices, the highest court in the land, the most esteemed lawyers in our country, the women are interrupted, the female justices are interrupted 2/3 more often than their male colleagues. In a place where your voice is how you're driving, you know, that's how the court decisions are being made, having voice, having influence, having opinions. And that plays out in financial industries, on conference calls, in the New York Times, at an op-ed section, wherever you look. And so I think we have to be honest with each other and the young women we're mentoring about the realities. And then I think it's really empowering to be honest about what moments have worked for us and what moments haven't. The times when I teach a seminar for my seniors on leadership, and I share these statistics, I share these stories, and then I share moments for me when it worked and when it didn't. When someone commented and made an inappropriate comment about my body or what I was wearing when I was pregnant, and the moment when I didn't know exactly what to say in that conference room, and then when I figured it out, I finally had my witty retort that said, yeah, whatever, step off. Yes, I'm pregnant. I get it. Right. How you do it, whatever that moment was, but
Right.
to try to find ways to help people understand, particularly girls, that these things happen. They should be cognizant of it. There are moments when it will work and there's moments when it won't, and we can together figure it out. So I think that's part of the story. And that's why I love having these conversations, Tracy. I'm so happy we're here today to talk about it, because I think this is the first and most important step.
And you can learn from it when it doesn't work. That's when you learn the most, right?
Yep.
And you can learn that, guess what? Tomorrow comes, whatever that thing was, right? Talk about, your view of the greater Philadelphia area. What do you think our greatest strengths are right now as we all sort of reemerge to this new normal?
Yeah, I think I go back to the people. And people, we've seen that at so many moments in time, and now more than ever. I think the diversity of people in the Philadelphia area, the diversity of skill sets, the sorts of the people who are attracted to the wonderful area that I grew up in and then left and came back to and now love again in a new way. I think that people are key, and we're fortunate to be in an environment where that is, so rich. And it's also the resources of the institutions, the museums, the schools, the nonprofits, and for-profits as well. But I'm specifically always focused on the nonprofits to say, this is a community where we have a lot at our fingertips. And so it's about trying to figure out how to use that and bring it, into the conversation more and more. It's been so much fun to be part of an institution that is in such a rich community, because I think it gives us opportunities that you wouldn't have elsewhere in the country or the world.
I hope everybody goes out and gets your book, but for people to take away from today, give us a couple of specific how-tos. If you're a parent, or if you're an educator, or if you're just someone who has nieces, who has young women in her life, to raise a strong woman. In here, you talk about nurture, collaborative problem solving, helping her find her voice. But give me a couple of real specifics on how we can do that.
Yeah, I think, so first of all, go out and read the book. Thank you, Tracy. And my publisher would say, that's the first thing. Read the book. It's all in there.
It's all in there.
I think one of the keys that comes out through both the research and my personal experience is that little things make a big difference. Little moments. This isn't about being the perfect parent, the perfect mentor, the perfect boss. This is about finding little moments to empower those around you, particularly through the lens of what do young women and girls need slightly differently. And so it's finding little moments and doing things slightly differently. The example I'll give is about, how do we help raise women's voices and raise girls' voices from a young age? It's the fact that the next time you're at a restaurant, have your daughter or the young woman at the table place the order. right? It sounds silly. We're all used to it. It's easy. And now we sort of, don't even think about it. Instead of ordering it on via Uber Eats, make the phone call to the restaurant for your takeout, but hand the phone to your daughter and say, hey, no, you place the order. The first time she does it, she may not want to, she may never like doing it, but she will get used to the sound and feeling of speaking up on behalf of others. That can start from elementary school. And then there are moments throughout life that are built on that. The version when we're professional adults is around the conference table. Make sure that you are calling on the voices of everyone, right? That there's a moment in the meeting where everyone has to speak. Okay, we have an idea on the table. I want to hear from everyone. We're just going to go around the room. So there is not the default expectation of having, for many women, that difficult moment of putting your voice forward and being heard, but it is something that you're helping set a foundation for pulling out. Again, little things that over time build what I call muscle memory, the muscle memory of speaking up, speaking out, and feeling empowered with your voice. So the book is full of these little moments, little ways that you can have really big impact. But I think that hopefully is just one that everyone can put in their hip pocket for the next time they're either at home with their daughters or their nieces or the young women in their life or around the conference table at work.
We've been asking people to hit us with some questions. And one question that we got when you and I were speaking about empathy was, how do you teach empathy? And I would guess first is recognizing exactly what it is and exactly seeds that we already have, and then developing it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, again, so you're right. So recognizing that empathy is different than sympathy, that there's like different things that mean empathy in action, to use that, like what is tangible empathy? Tangible empathy is being able to understand the perspective of another and take that perspective into account when you make decisions. You don't necessarily need to feel the emotions, which is a little bit more, that's sympathy, but it's just being able to decision make with someone else in mind. You can teach that. One thing that research shows is reading books, reading fiction books that have a protagonist that is a little bit like you, the reader, actually builds empathy. So we are very conscious with our reading list at Baldwin, and we are very conscious about choosing books that place a young girl of approximate age of the reader, the grade that class is reading, but places them in a different context, a historical context, a difficult, challenging moment. It depends on the age and what's being discussed. And then the questions that you ask about reading the book are, well, what do you think she's thinking? What do you think she wants to do next? What do you think would help her most? Right? Because it's about trying to understand how to take that into account when you're decision making. As you get older, it's about doing the same for teenagers or for those around you. When you service projects, a great way to begin building empathy. But then the conversation about the service projects, we just had a big service day here at school yesterday. And when the girls came back, the questions weren't just about, well, how did it go? What did you do? How did it feel for you? It was, well, what do you think the impact was about rebuilding that playground? Right? Like, so who's going to use it? What are they going to think when they get there? Right? Like, how does that, taking that next step is how you cultivate the actual act of empathy. Interestingly, the example I'll give from the private sector for adults out there, they have started to teach empathy at Ford Motor Company, right? So old school, traditional company where you think like these newfangled ideas don't hold. No, they teach empathy at Ford Motor Company by having their new engineers put on what they call the pregnancy suit. Most of the engineers are men, will have and would never have sort of gone through pregnancy. So they make them wear a suit where they have a big belly and they wrap their chest so it's tight and they have weights on them and all this stuff. And then they make them get in and out of Ford motor vehicles to try to understand what a female customer might go through. And then to design and build with that in mind. So you can do this at all levels, at all times, but it's about finding ways to practice that act of thinking on behalf of the other.
One question, what are your best tips for those of us who are raising young men in this moment?
I love that question. I'm so focused on girls. I have, my 570 girls here and that's who's always on my mind. But yeah, we need to empower our young men, our boys to be advocates for the girls in their lives. I think the first and foremost, is role modeling. For the men on this call, I love seeing some chime in. And so for those whose partners at home or who have boys, to help them be role models for the things we're talking about, for teaching them around the dining table that they need to make room for their sister, or the woman to talk, for helping demonstrate the importance and the value of the female, the woman, the girl's role in all of this. With a young boy at home, I'm thinking that exactly, like, how do I want him to be the best partner ever for whomever he's with, you know, not in just a romantic sense, but like the partner at the business table, the partner at the, you know, in a classroom for a lab. And so I think it's about being really conscientious and conscious of how we're modeling those things, and then holding our boys to the standards that we think are appropriate, right? And calling it out when you see, you know, the funny example I'll give from my girls here is I was teaching a leadership seminar last week, and we were talking about how these moments play out in the corporate world or in the real world. They're all about to head to college, so they're thinking that way. And someone said, yeah, you know, but I saw that at Model Congress last week too. She went to Model Congress, and her, you know, her team was, you know, all different schools, and it was all these boys, and they started talking over her. And when it came time to sort of go get snacks, said, hey, want to go get snacks for the rest of us? And she was like, no, I don't. But why are you, you know, but she hadn't really realized what was going on until in retrospect, she was like, yeah, that's what happened. I was the provider of the snacks. I was the note taker, or they thought I would be. And at some point I had to say, hey, you know, I have an idea too. This is what it is. And this is what I think we should do about it. So I think we see those moments play out in lots of different times throughout, you know, a young boy's adolescent growth. We have to call it out and start training them differently so that it stops it before they get to the corporate boardroom or wherever they head next.
And one final question before we wrap: how much do we push girls, but almost how much are we pushing boys? Perhaps too far, competitively speaking. Is there such a thing as pushing too much when it comes to being competitive for both girls and boys?
And this is sort of you know, gender aside,
Yeah.
is such thing as being too competitive.
Right.
Well, this is where I think it's the difference between a healthy competitor and a maladaptive competitor. I think too often, you know, when speaking with parents in particular of young children, you know, the idea of we don't play competitive board games as a household because I don't want my kids to feel like competition, like that's a good thing. But again, it's a difference between if you're teaching competition as something where you're being your best, you're being your personal best, you're okay with winning or losing, and then you go at it again, that's super healthy. Right? When competition becomes bad for kids and adults is when it becomes about cheating, about winning at all costs, about, you know, being a sore loser. I mean, those are the moments when it goes too far. I actually think, for the most part, being a healthy competitor is like knows no bounds. I mean, it's why, you know, you look at the research and over 90% of female CEOs and females in the C-suite were competitive athletes through at least high school. Right? Because they learned and they've cemented this muscle memory of, no, I want to go out there and be my personal best. It's also interesting that research shows when you are, you know, whether it's running or bicycling or doing any sort of physical activity, and if you're running against somebody, like there's somebody beside you, even if it's not for a race with a medal, but just someone else there, you do better. Like, you know, there's a physiological response that says you perform best when you have to be pushed. So I actually would argue that the limit is when it becomes maladaptive, when it becomes about some version of cheating or undermining the other or being, you know, not okay with second place or whatever place you're in. But before that point, it's just about really being your personal best and embracing that.
I have a final question for you. I want to know what your parents did right for you to be dreaming at the age of 10 that you wanted to fly jets.
So, yeah, well, I mean, I think in so many ways I had the good fortune of you know, of having parents who just said, go for it. Right. Who literally, when I had the crazy ideas of wanting to fly and wanting to do this, like the things that were unusual for the era, I, you know, when I wanted to fly jets, you were not actually legally allowed to. I didn't know that. Right. So when that was my dream,
I love that. That's great.
That was my dream. They didn't approve women flying in combat aviation positions until 96. I'd already said that was my goal, and I had no idea that it was actually illegal. No one mentioned that to me. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, they had changed the law. You know, but I think these are the times where parents seeing their kid as an individual and saying, you know, how do we like fill that bucket, whatever that bucket is, that passion, it will change over time. It's going to be jets one day and space the next day and dinosaurs the next, and who knows, right? But embracing that, putting aside whatever social norms or expectations are there and saying, okay, we have you and we have your back and we support you. And I think, I had the good fortune of having that from an early age. I will also say I had the good fortune of going to Baldwin. So I did have the pleasure and honor of going to Baldwin for middle school and high school, and being in a girls only and girls first community that said there are no limits, there are just hurdles along the way and we can figure it out together, was really empowering from a young age for me.
Dr. Porges, thank you so much. Thanks for all your answers. Thanks for sharing all of your expertise. And thank you so much for this. I'll be giving it to a lot of women in my life. And I will send it back to Nicole. Nicole, thank you. This has just been wonderful. A big thank you to you and to everyone involved at SPW.
Oh my gosh, thank you both so much. If you can't hear the applause, I have tons of comments coming in of how amazing this interview was. So thank you both so much for your time today and for all of your responses. And Tracy, I know you've read that book in like a week. I'm jealous. I need to get the book myself still, but thank you so much.